Hello everybody, I'm Periasa. I've been wanting to make a video like this for a while now. Based on the current state of Guild Wars 2, there's been a huge influx of players lately, new and returning, and based on some of my friends' reactions to the story content in particular, there's not really currently an easy way for these new players to get into the story if they're not acquainted with what came before. If they're just starting Heart of Thorns or Path of Fire, they don't have a whole lot of context regarding who the characters are or what has led up to the conflicts they see in the stories. Hopefully, through this video, I can elucidate some of the story information that might have been missed as a result of it being temporary content. I've been playing Guild Wars 2 on and off since launch, and have played almost all the story content that's been in the game, so hopefully I have some authority over the subject, though I don't claim to know everything, and I'm not an expert by any means. A few disclaimers before I start. First of all, I highly recommend experiencing this content in-game if possible, as I cannot verbally convey the way in which game mechanics or voice acting tells this narrative. I understand that Living World Season 1 is no longer playable, and Seasons 2 and 3 or Heart of Thorns may not be content you are willing or able to spend money on. Again, this is fine, that's what this video is here for. However, my summaries of the story will inevitably be far less interesting than actually playing the game. As this video is intended to explain key plot points, there will be spoilers. I will break up the video by each chunk of the story and give sufficient warning before divulging plot details for the subsequent part, but do be advised, spoilers will not be held back. Finally, I will be telling the whole game's story with the exception of the personal story from the vanilla game and Path of Fire. The vanilla game's story is free content and is way too large in scope to tackle for the purpose of this video, while Path of Fire is very new narrative content and does not need to be summarized as context for anything else yet. So, without further ado, I'll start off by talking about Living World Season 1. So, the beginning of Season 1 is a little nebulous. At this period, ArenaNet was still experimenting with temporary content releases, and arguably the first Halloween and Winter's Day events can be counted as a part of this season. However, I'm only going to cover information that's completely relevant to the central story and where it's at as of more recent content, so we'll start with the introductions of key characters. The first significant characters we meet are Bram Eirson and Rox. Bram, son of Erste Vulcan, is a Norn man from the town called Kragstead. Rox is a Gladium attempting to gain entry into Ritlock's Stone Warband. At this time, the Flame Legion and Dredge have been sighted across Ascalon and the Shiver Peaks working together, though the purposes of this alliance are not yet clear. The player character helps Rox and Bram deal with these threats separately. They help Bram defend his home village of Kragstead, and secure the North Nolan hatchery with Rox. Around this time, the player also meets Canuck, a second-born Sylvari fugitive who had been working with the shady merchant organization, the Consortium. The Consortium's involvement on South Sun Cove to try and create a new resort provoked the native Karka, which then attacked Lion's Arch. Canuck is blamed for this and is taken into custody by the Lion Guard. He ends up escaping, but is captured again by the player character at South Sun and jailed at Fort Mariner. Next, the player meets Marjorie Delacroix, a human private investigator who had formerly been a member of the Ministry Guard. She is commissioned by Logan Thackeray to investigate the recent assassination of Captain Theo Ashford at the Dragon Bash Festival. The player character helps her learn the truth behind the attack and about the Aetherblade's involvement. At this point, the story begins to focus on a more singular threat as the Queen's Jubilee in Divinity's Reach, the 10-year celebration of Queen Jenna's rule, is attacked by a mysterious stranger and the Crown's own army of mechanical watch knights. The stranger returns during the Jubilee's closing ceremony, at which point she reveals her face and her name. She's a Sylvari who calls herself Scarlet Briar. Information about her history began to surface at this time. She had been, essentially, a precocious scholar who cast off her obligation in calling from the Dream and the Pale Tree, and traveled in solitude, studying voraciously but finding her thirst for knowledge unquenched. Eventually, she worked with Omad, the headmaster of the Asuran College of Synergetics, and tested his machine that would theoretically access the eternal alchemy. But when she emerged from the machine, she claimed that she had seen everything, and killed Omad. In the next major story step, we get to know a character named Lady Casimir Mead, who helps us fight a faction of allied Crate and Nightmare Court Sylvari, known as the Toxic Alliance. She's a human mesmer and a noble who's recently lost her status, and also she's Marjorie's girlfriend. Anyway, this tower is shielding a plant that's spreading toxic spores, and just generally causing problems, so the player, Cass, and Marjorie run into the tower, kill a bunch of Crate, and use an antitoxin to stop the spores from destroying the environment more. By this time, it's apparent that the Molten Alliance from back at the beginning, the Aetherblades, the Crown's Watch Knights, and now the Toxic Alliance were all orchestrated by Scarlet, though her motives for causing so much chaos are still unknown. We learn that Scarlet made a significant breakthrough at some point, that she discovered a network of magical channels that span the globe. These are ley lines. They'll be super important throughout a lot of the story, so don't forget about them. We also quickly learn about a giant Watch Knight moving through the Shiver Peaks. All our friends we've worked with so far, Brant, Rox, Marjorie, and Casimir, join us in the fight against this machine. Here, we're also introduced to Taimi, a young Asuran prodigy who idolizes Scarlet and her work, insisting that being a homicidal maniac makes her no less of a genius. Taimi doesn't have a whole lot of consequence to do just yet, but don't worry, we'll see a lot of her later on. At this point, the Priory ventures to Scarlet's lair under their headquarters to gain more information about her, including a journal she's kept. With this new information and everything that's happened in the past year, we take a look at everything we know about Scarlet in an effort to predict her next move, and eventually we come to the conclusion that she's plotting an unstoppable attack on Lion's Arch. The Captain's Council are warned immediately, but don't adequately prepare for the attack, and the city is sieged from all directions by all Scarlet's assembled forces. The battle is devastating, completely destroying large parts of the Free City and resulting in many casualties. Scarlet brings a giant drill mechanism called the Breachmaker and uses it to drill into a ley line hub beneath Lion's Arch. While the situation in Lion's Arch is being dealt with by Lion Guard, Vigil, and all the military brass that the city can muster, our heroes storm the Breachmaker and fight a hologram in Scarlet's image, then confront Scarlet herself. She proudly claims that Tyria will bow before a new master, and tells the heroes that they are foolish if they think her death will change anything. But before anybody can kill her, she sets off an explosion that hurts Bram and Marjorie, but doesn't really help Scarlet much because we still manage to kill her. However, it's moments too late, as the Breachmaker strikes the ley line, resulting in an outpouring of magic energy. The drill is destroyed, and a dragon's roar is heard in response to the rush of magic. Thus, we transition promptly into Season 2. Again, obligatory spoiler warning. This is the first bit of content that's actually still playable in the game that I will be summarizing in this video, so if you would like to experience it firsthand, please be advised before watching this next part. Season 2 opens with the discovery of a passage into the Maguma Wastes in southwest Brisbane wildlands that's covered with thick vines. These vines are a result of the incursion of the newly awakened elder dragon Mordremoth. The Seraph soldiers stationed in Brisbane wildlands, including Marjorie's sister Belinda, who we meet for the first time, are in the process of reopening the passage. Through the passage, we discover Drytop, where we find a base that Scarlet had been using while she was studying ley lines. Through a passage in Scarlet's apartment, we venture deeper into Drytop, and we discover a laboratory on a ley line hub. We'll be back here later. For the time being, we follow the path of Mordremoth's vines, to Forts Concordia and Selma. Both forts are torn apart by vines, and Belinda Delacroix, who was at Fort Selma, is killed. Marjorie stays behind to make funeral arrangements for her sister, but everybody else goes back to the lab in Drytop where Taimi has found Omad's machine, the same device that broke Scarlet's mind. Taimi activates the machine and impulsively runs in. You run in after her and take the blast of energy from the machine, and see a vision of the eternal alchemy and the pale tree like Scarlet had, but you don't go all crazy, obviously. You decide to meet with the Pale Tree, and when you do, she proposes that you gather the 5 main racial leaders to hold a summit about what to do with Mordremoth. The Pale Tree and Traherne, naturally, agree to come immediately, and you and your friends help out Councillor Flunt, Imperator Smoder, Queen Jenna, and Newt Whitebear so that they can attend the summit as well. This takes a while, and most of it isn't directly pertinent to the larger story, but notably, in an effort to convince Smoder to attend, Ritlock performs a ritual that purges a bunch of ghosts from Ascalon, but loses his sword in the mists and jumps in after it, so it's unclear what happens to him at this point. Also, we learn that Canuck is out of jail and working for Countess Anise until his billet is released. So next, we have our summit at the Grove, and this goes about as well as you'd think it would. All the leaders give you a tentative yes on helping with Mordremoth, but then Mordremoth's vines attack the Pale Tree, and you fight off the assaulting Mordrem. All the leaders are fine except the Pale Tree herself, who is basically comatose for the foreseeable future as a result of this attack. So a little while later, Traherne contacts you and asks you to come to the new packed foothold in the Silver Wastes, Camp Resolve, where they're preparing to mobilize against Mordremoth. You help him find a patrol squad, then go to the Dermond Priory to help out Marjorie and Casimir, where you 3 go to Glint's lair. Glint is the good dragon who helped Destiny's Edge fight Kralkatorrik but was killed, by the way, and find out about an egg that Glint laid at some point, but its whereabouts are currently unknown. Because of the Zephyrite's history with Glint, you decide it's a good idea to go and find them to see what they know about the egg, and so you track their Master of Peace to a labyrinth in the Silver Wastes. He's dying as a result of an injury inflicted by a Mordrum, and passes the egg on to you, but before you can get it, Kaith pops in and steals it without any explanation. At this point, we obviously have to figure out what's up with Kaith, so the semi-conscious Pale Tree gives us some memory seeds that we can plant in certain locations to witness Kaith's memories and find out what she's up to. Using these seeds, we find out that in their youth, Fallon and Kaith had tracked another firstborn, Wynn, to the northern Silver Wastes, in an effort to find out what she was hiding. At this point, the Pact is about to take off to engage Mordremoth before it fully awakens, but we're preoccupied with the egg, so we say bye to our friends Traherne and Destiny's Edge minus Ritlock and Kaith and proceed to the location of the last memory. We learn that Wynn's secret was that the Pale Tree and, by extension, the Sylvari, were created by the jungle dragon Mordremoth intended to serve it, and that Kaith had killed Wynn to protect that secret. After we learn this, Kaith shows up again, explaining that she's on our side, before we fight a huge Mordrum and Kaith escapes again. At this point, the Pact takes off without us, but this quickly goes wrong. Immediately after the airships begin to fire, vines attack the ships, tearing them out of the sky. Some of the Sylvari on the ships attack survivors. This is where Living World Season 2 leaves us, and the narrative continues in Heart of Thorns. Again, spoilers for Heart of Thorns to follow. It's Grand War Master Larenthir from the Vigil who first requests your aid in Maguma. You and your crew proceed into Verdant Brink, where you see firsthand the wreckage of the Pact fleet and find a camp of survivors. Larenthir is among them. Some of the soldiers are openly distrustful of Sylvari, claiming that they are Mordremoth's minions and cannot be trusted. You learn from Larenthir that Traherne and Destiny's Edge survived the crash, but were taken deeper into the jungle as prisoners. As night falls on the camp, you fight off the Mordrum, and suddenly Ritlock returns from the mists, now wielding Revenant abilities. He's tight-lipped about what he saw there, but he joins you, helping the camp stave off the attack. Eventually, you make it to the center of the jungle, where you find a Pact encampment and learn that Kaith was seen heading west with the egg. You follow up with the Itzel, a local tribe of Hylek, and with their help, locate a nearby prison camp. There, you find Aristogulkin and Fowlin, who are trapped in a pod together. You free them, but a giant Mordrum Vinetooth gets the jump on them, prompting them to run away. Fallon trips, and Air helps her up, but she betrays Air by stabbing her with a thorn. As Fallon continues to run, Air pulls out the thorn, throwing it at Fallon and nailing her with it. Both women are caught by the Vinetooth, and, as far as we can tell, both are killed. Bram, witnessing his mother's death firsthand, is devastated and insists that he be allowed to stay behind and bury her. Rox stays with him. As we keep on moving into the jungle, we find Tarir, a marvelous golden city in the depths of Maguma. We also find Kaith and the egg, who is being attacked by a beast that looks like the Vinetooth that killed Air, but bears the face of Fallon. Finally, we get the egg and escape to the city, which is inhabited by beings of light called the Exalted. These Exalted were created by the Forgotten and charged with protecting Glint's legacy. The egg is left safely in their charge. From the egg, we see a prophetic vision of Mordremoth using the captive Destiny's Edge members as templates for a new army of Mordrum who will be unleashed on Tyria. Taimi locates a map of ley energy within an Exalted ruin, and discovers a large, unknown concentration of magic. An Exalted still in the ruin explains that this is the ancient Asura city of Rada Novus, and that's where we decide to head next. Bram and Rox rejoin the group as we head into Tangled Depths, but the group is quickly split up again as we learn from a Pact camp that the prisoner caravan is still heading south. We go with Taimi, Kanak, and Bram to Rada Novus, and when we finally arrive, we find it quiet and abandoned. The local wildlife, namely, a vicious insectoid race that feeds on ley energy called the Chalk, have evidently wiped out the city's former inhabitants. The research found within the city suggests that each of the Elder Dragons possess some unique weakness and can be killed, but does not specifically state what Mordremoth's is. Taimi stays behind in Rada Novus. Everyone else moves deeper into the jungle. The Pact, regrouped thanks to our efforts, has established a base camp just outside the dragon's stronghold from which to launch an attack. Agent Zri of the Order of Whispers is able to covertly ferry us deeper into enemy territory so that we may look for our allies who are still missing. We find Zoja and Logan Thackeray trapped in Mordrum blighting pods. We get to choose which one to save first, but the choice doesn't especially matter, as you do manage to save both of them. They're both seriously injured, but alive. Casimir stays behind to get them to safety, while everyone else moves deeper into the dragon's territory. We finally manage to locate Traherne, but not before Vinetooth Fowlin attacks. We kill her, and proceed after Traherne, who has been pulled deeper into the jungle's underground. We find him in a vine-covered chamber. He explains that he's become a part of Mordramoth, but we can use his connection to the dragon to attack it in the dream. We enter the dream along with two of our allies, selected from Kaith, Bram, and Canuck, to strike directly at Mordramoth's mind. The battle is long and hard fought. Mordramoth creates illusory copies of our allies. We fight these illusions and turn them to our side, and finally we take down the dragon in the dream. Our brief moment of celebration is cut short when Traherne makes a final request of the player character. He explains that in order to fully kill Mordramoth, he must be killed as well, or the dragon will come back to life. At his urging, you take his sword Caladbolg and sacrifice his life with the blade. With Traherne's death, Mordramoth's ley energy spills out into the world, including toward Glint's egg and Tarier. At this point, the Heart of Thorns story just kind of ends. There's no real epilogue, it's sort of weird. But it picks right back up again in Season 3. Again, spoilers for all 6 episodes of Season 3 coming up. Season 3 begins with a funeral for Air in Holbrack organized by Bram, though he is nowhere in sight. Britlock proposes starting a new guild, Dragon's Watch, now that Destiny's Edge is basically done. We visit Taimi in the Radanovis lab after the memorial, where we learn that she's been monitoring Glint's egg and Tarier. Almora Soulkeeper, the founder of the Vigil, shows up and offers you the position as the pack's new marshal, but you turn her down. Then Canuck shows up and says that he's after the traitorous Minister Caudicus, who has fled Divinity's Reach to Maguma. General Soulkeeper offers her airship to bring you and Canuck back to Divinity's Reach, but while you are flying back over the jungle, you witness a massive explosion that nearly destroys the ship, but is absorbed back on itself just before the blast radius reaches you. The airship stops there in Bloodstone Fen, the previous site of the Maguma Bloodstone, which has just exploded. On the ground, the situation is pretty bad. Curiously, large groups of White Mantle were in the blast radius, along with several packed soldiers, and they're all crazed and empowered by the Bloodstone magic. A Shining Blade messenger shows up, telling you about Caudicus, and you, Ritlock, Marjorie, and Canuck go up to a coliseum floating above the jungle. Caudicus is there and declares that he's the leader of the White Mantle, but then a Mursat appears out of nowhere, calling himself Lazarus the Dyer. He calls Caudicus a heretic, killing many of his followers, but Caudicus escapes. Taimi contacts the group and states that Primordus is active. Next, we go to the Ring of Fire island chain. We discover that the destroyers there have absorbed some of Zaitan's and Mordramoth's energies, and possess death and plant magic. Taimi tells us that she heard from Bram that Jormag is also active. At Ember Bay, you activate 4 ancient dwarven devices which prevent a catastrophic volcanic eruption. Soon after, we get a vision from Glint's egg, and feel that it is about to hatch, so we head back to Tarier. The dragon hatches, and almost immediately, destroyers show up and try to kill the hatchling. We defend the dragon, and eventually Lazarus shows up, offering his aid. Reluctantly, we trust him, and he helps us fight off the assault. After the attack subsides, Marjorie pops in and volunteers to follow around Lazarus for a little while to confirm his intentions and study him. Kaith is also there and volunteers to stay in Tarier and guard the hatchling. We say that her name is Aurene. After a little bit, we head back to Tarier to help train Aurene. Taimi calls us and says that she's devised a plan to pit Primordus and Jormag against each other. After that, we head to the Shiver Peaks, where it's reported that Bram is currently. We find Bram in a cave very far north, and he's angry at us. We tell him about Dragon's Watch, and he thinks that not being a part of Destiny's Edge is disrespectful to his mother's memory. In the cave, he finds a mystic scroll, which he uses to enchant his mother's bow, intending to go and take the next fight to Jormag. We tell him not to, explaining that Taimi might be able to get Primordus and Jormag to fight each other, but this infuriates him, and he insults us and our actions and storms off back to Holbrack. He shoots Jormag's tooth with the enchanted bow and cracks it, then summarily begins rallying a group of Norn to go fight the ice dragon. Meanwhile, tensions within Kryda have come to a head, with the White Mantle gaining power and attempting to overthrow the monarchy. Queen Jenna summons us to Divinity's Reach for a meeting with the ministers. It is unclear who among them is still loyal to the crown and who sympathizes with the White Mantle. The Queen announces that she will temporarily suspend the council, and while the ministers protest this decision, the city is attacked from Lake Doric. Turns out, Queen Jenna is a super strong mesmer, and she erects a massive shield around the city center. One of the ministers, Estelle, shows up and declares that she was personally tapped by Codicus to kill Queen Jenna, but Logan also shows up and we kill Estelle. Logan begins organizing the Seraph to protect the people of Lake Doric, which is under siege. We help out immensely in the effort to secure the townships and stop the White Mantle incursion. Finally, we have to go take out Minister Codicus himself. While the Seraph are attacking the front side of the mansion, we accompany Demi Beetlestone, Codicus's daughter who fled and joined the Order of Whispers, in through a back entrance. Countess Anise and Canuck join along the way. Codicus is killed, but fatally shoots his daughter. Anise releases Canuck from her service, and Lady Valette Wee, who had been working with Codicus, replaces him. Evidence in Codicus's study suggests that the Mersat Lazarus is not really what he seems to be, and that he could not have been resurrected properly, as one of his aspects was missing. The next time we hear from Timey, she's finished her machine to make the Elder Dragons fight. At her lab, we meet up with Casimir, who agrees to join Dragon's Watch. While we're there, Marjorie suddenly rushes in, explaining that Lazarus, quote-unquote, isn't far behind, that he's been acting suspiciously and carrying around a mirror. Cass theorizes that this is linked to a mesmeric illusion, and using mirrors in Timey's lab, sets up a trap to expose his true identity. When Lazarus arrives, it's revealed that he's actually the human god Balthazar, and Balthazar attacks Marjorie. Casimir, ashamed that she wasn't able to react quickly enough, runs off. Balthazar too takes off, and we track him to Draconis Mons in the Ring of Fire. While we are in Draconis Mons, Timey calls us and informs us that the death of any more Elder Dragons will destabilize Tyria's magic to a dangerous, potentially catastrophic degree, and we can't allow Balthazar to kill any of them. Helping the ancient druid spirits grants us a blessing that allows us to resist extreme temperatures, and so we descend into the massive volcano at the center of the island. There, we see Balthazar attacking Primordus using Timey's device. In order to stop him, we overload the device. Primordus and, purportedly, Jormag return to a dormant state, while Balthazar disappears after absorbing the energy from the machine. The last episode of Season 3, frankly, doesn't actually have a lot to do with the story. It's just kind of a weird filler episode right at the end of the season, and it doesn't exactly feel like a conclusion, but that said, I'll give a brief summary of it anyway. We go to a White Mantle hideout in Brisbane Wildlands at the behest of Countess Anise, where we find some of the remnants of the scattered organization holding one of Anise's exemplars prisoner. We free her and retrieve the missing aspect of Lazarus, the reason the real Lazarus hadn't been revived despite the White Mantle's efforts. We head back to Divinity's Reach, and Anise has us take an oath and join the Shining Blade. I don't know why we do this, to be totally honest, it's weird. After taking the oath, we have enough autonomy to do whatever needs to be done, so long as it doesn't go against Kryda. So again, kind of pointless, I don't know. We'll see if this goes anywhere, but for now it's like, huh? Okay, so anyway, we go to Or and try to look for a way to open Abaddon's reliquary. The Shining Blade exemplar we rescued earlier, who's introduced herself as Karita, explains that she intends to revive the real Lazarus and kill him. We activate all the other 5 reliquaries, go into Abaddon's, assemble the 5 aspects of Lazarus. Karita is revealed to actually be Livia, a character from the original Guild Wars, who had sworn that she would eliminate the Mersat and stop the White Mantle. We work with Livia and manage to kill Lazarus, thus eliminating the Mersat from the world. Hooray! The Eye of Janthier has been hanging around in the reliquary this whole time, and so before it too is destroyed with the death of the Mersat, we ask it where Balthazar's at and see a vision of him in the Crystal Desert. And then we decide that this is where we have to go next. We must stop Balthazar before we can bring about the ruin of the world. Okay guys, that's it. At this point, you should be more or less caught up and ready to experience Path of Fire. Sorry if I glossed over or skipped anything important, especially in Season 1. Again, my focus for this video was brevity, not detail, and there are more thorough resources out there if you're willing to invest the time. Also, most of these story missions are still playable in-game. I'll leave a link in the description for a way to more thoroughly experience Season 1, as that is no longer playable, but otherwise, if you're interested in experiencing any of these stories firsthand, I recommend buying them if you can spare the money. Thank you so much for watching my video. Leave a like and a comment if you feel so inclined, and maybe subscribe. I use this channel primarily for speed paints, but if this video gets popular, I may end up doing more like it in the future. We'll see. Have a wonderful day, and enjoy Guild Wars 2 Path of Fire.